I would once again like to welcome you to today's Faculty Leading the Change session, using real-time feedback to improve course design and instruction. Our three subject matter experts on the line are Brandy Horvath, who is a senior learning experience designer in PDCD. We also have Dr. Sherry Harrison, who is an academic coordinator in the Richard W. Riley College of Education and Human Services and Sciences, And we also have Dr. Mark Clauburg, who is also an associate dean in the Richard W. Riley College of Education and Human Sciences. At this point, I'm going to turn things over to you. Welcome. It's so great to have the three of you in the room today.
Thank you. I just take a quick moment to introduce myself. I'm Brandy Horvath, a senior learning experience designer with Walden, and I've been with Walden for about 5 years, and I have been working in this field for about 25 years, and I'm glad to be here today to share with you all about using real-time feedback. And I'll hand it over to Sherry.
Oh, hi, everybody. Thank you for taking time to join us. I've been with Walden for going on 21 years. I've had the opportunity to work with so many great people at Walden and in numerous programs, and I'm the academic coordinator in the MS-IDT and MS-IDT programs.
Hi, everybody. This is Mark Clauburg. I am Associate Dean in the College of Education, overseeing MS-IDT, MS-IDT, Instructional Design and Technology, as well as MS in Higher Education. Been with Walden for 15 years and coming to you from New Jersey. And on that note, let's get started. Today we'll be speaking with you about using real-time feedback to improve both course design and instruction. So one of those two might be more relevant for you based on what your background is. Essentially, it all started with a pilot that PDCD, which is our product development team, they asked MS-IDT to participate in. It was a good fit, and it was good timing.
Listen, are you going to that meeting tonight, the quarterly meeting?
It was good timing for us because we were in the midst of a major upgrade, the first one we've had since we launched our program back in 2009. So on the screen, you could see our agenda for today. In a moment, I'm going to hand it off to Brandy, who will give a quick overview of the pilot project that brought us all together. We'll then speak a bit on the research we used to ground our work in as we applied real-time feedback in the upgraded MS-IDT program. We're also going to distinguish between how we use the feedback, and those two areas were in learning and course design. So two different things that we want to make a distinction about. Along the way, we did encounter some challenges, but we worked through it with this fantastic team. We'll talk about that process. And to wrap up our presentation, we're going to share how folks in attendance, how you can either get involved in the pilot, or if you don't wish to get involved, how you can apply some of the real-time feedback techniques that we're going to discuss. And of course, we'll save some time for the end for questions, and we look forward to a fruitful discussion with anybody in attendance. And at this point, I'm going to hand it off to Brandy for some background information on the pilot.
Okay, thanks, Mark. So as Mark mentioned earlier, as a PDCD team, a number of us have been asking some questions for quite some time about, how can we get feedback from students that would enable us to have a more immediate impact in the classroom, whether that be in terms of something immediate that the instructor might be able to do, or something that we could do to improve the design of our courses. And so we asked a lot of questions on those lines, and we took them to the PDCD leadership. And that was what led us to this opportunity to launch this pilot program. Next slide, please. And so to get started, once we got the go-ahead to launch a pilot program and see what we could do with as far as collecting real-time feedback went, we looked at a number of things. And so one of the first things we looked at was, what data is it that we currently collect? And so And we looked at those things. We collect the Power BI reports, the CELT surveys. We can track links in Canvas to see if people have opened them or not. But that didn't quite get at what we were interested in. So then we went to looking at, okay, well, what exactly is it that we want to collect? What is that data? And so we wanted to be able to collect real-time feedback that would allow for adjustments either immediately by the instructor or, sometime close to the time that we receive the feedback by the PDCD team within the classroom, maybe to the structure of the assignments or the discussions or, something new that we're trying out that we want to see. Is it working in the way that we intended for it to work? Or if it's not, let's get some feedback from the students and see what we can do about that. And so, that approach just kind of depends on the nature of the question. And then we also then considered, how can we collect this? What are our options for doing this? What are the possibilities? And so we worked with the technology team and we explored a lot of different options and tools. And what we ultimately decided on was to pilot what we're calling impact pop-ups. And so these are feedback prompts that appear at the point of the element that we want to evaluate. And so what we wanted it to be able to do is to allow students to respond with both rating, both with a rating and also offer them the opportunity to include some comments and maybe elaborate further on what they're feeling about the particular element that we're asking them about. And then we also considered student participation. How might we encourage that in our pilot project? And so we thought, well, obviously we want to tell students up front about the survey and the potential impact that they can have by participating in that survey. And we also wanted to make sure that to clarify that it's not tied to their grade in any way and that participation is optional. So, just making it clear to them, if you participate, it's not going to help you, but it's not going to hinder you grade-wise. And then we also talked about the possibility of offering an incentive. And ultimately for this particular pilot, we decided not to do that because we were sort of wrestling with, we wanted the students to be able to respond anonymously, and we didn't want them to feel like their name or email address might be associated with their response. So that was what we did, but it's certainly possible, for future pilots, if somebody is interested in doing something similar, offering an incentive is not off the table. We just didn't choose to do that. And then another thing that we considered when we were looking to get started with this pilot was, some logistics issues, some technology related, which I kind of touched on already, being, excuse me, do we have the capability to include surveys directly within the course content in the Canvas classroom? And if so, what options do we have for delivering those surveys? What might enable us to do what it is that we want to accomplish? And so what we ultimately chose was to use Microsoft Forms within the Canvas classroom. And then another thing that we looked at logistics wise was, we also asked questions about, okay, once we get this data, then what are we going to do with it? So we wanted to make sure to consider, who would receive it and evaluate it, and what would be the change and approval process that we would want to use. And so as a part of planning for the pilot, we kind of at least started with documenting, an implementation process that would help to answer those questions for anybody that might want to do something like this in the future. Next slide, please. And so that was what got us to the point where we were able to launch the pilot with the MS-IDT program. The leadership felt that, this particular program was in a great spot development-wise to use it as a pilot. So we went with the first course in the program. So we launched this pilot in MS-IDT 6105. And how we went about it was we looked at the course, and in this particular case, we focused primarily on course design related issues because it was new and we were introducing some new technologies. These were things that we wanted to find out about, how were students receiving them? Was this working in the way that we intended for it to work? And we also decided that we would run the pilot over multiple terms, particularly because we wanted to collect data that would impact the classroom design. So we wanted to make sure that we were looking at it over time and looking for trends. And then another decision that we made was to include a welcome message that appears in week 1. And I kind of touched on this a moment ago. This welcome message, what it does is it explains to the students what to expect, and it encourages them to participate, and of course clarifies for them that it won't impact their grades. And then we have the feedback prompts appearing in various weeks throughout the course. The location of the prompts it appears on the course homepage, either for the duration of the week or for a specific date range, just depending on the question. And then as far as the dissemination of the information goes, all of the student responses are accessible from a Microsoft Forms dashboard. And so that can be set up on a project by project basis to allow access to, whoever is designated to have that access. It could be someone from the PDCD team, it could be, the academic team, and then whoever is the instructor for the course. So that can be flexible depending on the needs for the project. And so at this point, I'm going to go ahead and pass the baton over to Mark to talk a little bit about the research.
Thanks, Brandy. So the PDCD team from time to time does come to us with pilots because we're a tech-heavy program, and usually we're a target for that, and we accept them. But when this opportunity presented itself, we wanted to make sure that there was a strong rationale to do it. So Brandy talked about the functionality within Canvas to collect real-time data from MS-IDT students. So we kind of looked at those parameters and did a little research, see if there were any support out there for other institutions that may have done something similar. We found a couple pieces of research, but we narrowed it down to 2 that really helped inform our decision. Next slide, please. The first one somewhat provided a model for us to follow. In the study, it's very similar. The authors designed an instant feedback tool into their institution's online learning management system, similar to what Brandy was talking about. The tool appeared on the student interface, and it was a small icon, so non-intrusive. And students were able to initiate a response, get feedback. For this particular function, it was in an online discussion. So they would click on the icon, they would select from a drop-down menu of feedback options, and some of those options included phrases like already understand. So if the student understood what was expected of the discussion or the content, then they would choose something like that. And then there was another feedback prompt called clarify in simple terms. So this is, they needed additional help. And there were a few more of those. So those student selections were then consolidated into a real-time pie chart and shared with the instructors, and it helped the instructors deliver the lesson. So if there was a sense that students were struggling, the instructor could kind of take a step back and support them with some remediation. The second study was just an overall study of the evidence of real-time feedback in general to improve instructional practice. And when we came across that one, I felt like it gave us the green light to move forward. If anybody's interested in the full list of articles that we included here, I just went over the main 2. We've included references for all of the articles, and you can find that on our last slide. I'd like to hand it off to Sherry now. She's going to talk about the way MS-IDT specifically used real-time feedback for the student learning portion.
Thank you, Mark. So now you've heard the history of how this was done and the research of why it's done. What do we do with that feedback? What can be done to help students? So sometimes we don't get the feedback until later in the course, but sometimes during the course, if we're able to get the real-time feedback, clarifying confusing points to students, maybe could be that could be clarified during the course by the instructor, or it could be clarified in the master the next time the course runs if there's not time to do that. And then the instructor can kind of anticipate questions that they may get the next time the course runs just by having that feedback from the students. Instructors can refine their teaching methods because they kind of know maybe what assignment students felt like they needed more instruction or support on. And sometimes it might be that based on the real-time feedback, that an instructor jumps on a Teams meeting with students to try to clarify something that they've noticed. Several students have said was confusing or they had a question about. And sometimes it's something that you permanently change in the course of the future, or you may just wait and see what happens the next time the course runs. So if you have any ideas for real-time feedback, how that might be used by instructors, and you want to share that with us, and I haven't touched on or it's not listed on this slide, please feel free to put that in the chat or to pop on the microphone and ask any questions. And I'm going to hand it off to Brandy now to talk about how real-time course design feedback.
Okay, I was on mute there. Sorry. As Sherry was talking about, we can have an impact on the student learning, and then we can also have an impact on the actual design of the courses. And so here, what we're looking at are things like, things in the classroom, like the structure of an assignment, or perhaps the product that we're asking students to produce, or maybe a particular resource or a new technology that we're asking students to use. And so this real-time feedback pilot gives them an opportunity to kind of share what's working and what isn't. And as I mentioned earlier, this is particularly helpful when we're trying something new, or we're launching an assignment that's structured very differently than anything we've done before, or perhaps we want students to use a particular technology tool that they haven't been using in the past. This kind of feedback could be extremely helpful to get a feel for what's working and what's not. And then what we can do, of course, is over time we can gather that feedback. As I mentioned earlier, in the context of course design, we want to gather feedback over time so that we can look for patterns in the data and then use it to make timely changes and improvement. And so just really quickly, the images that you're seeing here on the screen, I wanted to kind of be able to put a visual to what it is that we're talking about related to this pilot. And so the image that you're seeing on the left, the green one, that is a screenshot of an actual pop-up that students would see. So in the darker green area, they're seeing like some introductory content to give them an idea of what the question's going to be about. Then they get the question, they see the scale where they can answer, based on how they feel. And then they also have that comment box in the bottom that allows them to elaborate and share, anything additional that will help us to, improve the design of the courses. And then on the right, the image that you're looking at, that is representative of what the dashboard looks like. So once a question has closed for a week, let's just say, for example, let's say this ran in week 2. So in week 3 or at the end of week 2, pretty much any time, but if you want to see the complete set of answers, you would look at it once the question has closed. And you can see all of the same information that the students saw, but then also have the pie chart, and you can see how many people responded. And then you can also, of course, you have the option to be able to read their text-based comments. And so in this, these two images pertain to both types of feedback that we would be soliciting from students, regardless if you're looking at something that would impact the student learning or the course design. These are still the representative of what the student would see, and then what the person receiving the data would see. Next slide, please. And then when we're talking about the course design feedback, we also end up with summary data. And so what we're seeing here is summary data for 2 of the terms that the pilot ran. And I think that this just kind of helps to illustrate the importance of collecting that data over time so that you can look for trends before making decisions about any major changes to classroom elements. For example, if we just went with the 1 term launch that's listed on the left, we had 10 students. So, obviously we wouldn't necessarily want to make a change just based on the response rates that we got in that 1 term. And so at this point, I'm going to go ahead and pass it back to Sherry to talk a little bit about the challenges and drawbacks.
Thank you, Brandy. We do have a question in the chat before I go to the next slide. Before I do this slide, the question is from Maria. Does Walden University use the Quality Matters rubric to evaluate a newly developed course? I was a recipient of it, and it helped me make some needed changes. Is there anybody who can respond to that question?
Brandy,
Sorry.
do you know if PDCD does anything like that? Because I know we're not currently doing that with the upgraded MS-IDT program. So at my program level, I'd say no. But Brandy, you might have more information.
I think some of the programs in the past have used the Quality Matters rubric. I have not personally, but would be very interested to see it. It sounds like it would be a valuable tool.
Thank you, Maria, for sharing that question and bringing that to our attention. So I'll go ahead and cover the next
You're
slide.
welcome. You're welcome. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So with real-time feedback, there are challenges and drawbacks. So one thing to think about is, does the feedback reflect personal preference or rather than pedagogical issues? In other words, is it just a learner's opinion? And so it's important to look at the feedback to see if there are trends or comments about the same issue, or do they contradict each other? And do the same types of comments occur more than once? Because it could just be a one-off. One student didn't understand something and there's no reason to jump in and change the whole entire course because it was only one person and everybody else understood it. So looking at that's important. Sometimes, just like life happens, somebody might be distracted or upset about something, not even about the course. And maybe they say everything was awful and it's like only one person. So you look at that and you try to figure that out. And like we said earlier, the way we're doing it, we don't know who is responding. So you sometimes wouldn't have that information to know maybe why they said what they said. So you just need to look at it to see if there are any trends. And we look to see, are the assignments effective in addressing the learning outcomes when we look at that feedback? And are there possible changes needed to enhance the course? Another drawback is it might be determined that, yes, oh, great, that would be awesome if we could change the course to be like this, but maybe we don't have the money to do it at the time, or we don't have the time to do it at that moment. And then, of course, then we can try to address whatever those questions are rather than changing the course. And sometimes some of the suggestions or things that we think might work might go against the way that courses are designed. And is that something that the approach and format used needs to be changed? So we would have to look into that to see. So different challenges and drawbacks. Are there any challenges and drawbacks that anybody who's here today can think of that want to share? You can either come off the mic or type in the chat.
Sherry, there was a great question in the chat. I think the first part is probably something Brandy could answer, and I might be able to do the second part. The first question is, what steps are included to account for the tendency of people to not only respond to surveys when they are unhappy, dissatisfied, but not when they are satisfied? Or maybe, Sherry, you hinted on it a little bit, but we actually talked about this in some meetings. I don't know, Brandy or Sherry, if you want to elaborate on that question or an answer to it.
I don't know. I know that we did discuss this, but I don't know that we necessarily, fully resolved this. I think in our case that we did not find that people that were unhappy were the only ones to respond. And I think this also played into our discussion a little bit about the possibility of using student incentives, which would help with that. But there again, like for us in our case, since we decided that we didn't want students to feel like it was not anonymous, we steered away from the incentives, but that's certainly a possibility in the future that incentives could be used to encourage students to respond.
And I think some steps that we took was how it was introduced in the course. So they knew this is here to help you, to help us help you. And also, so instructors also were asked to share with students, this is going to be happening in the course. And again, this is to help us, to help you. And, of course, I'm sure there are people who respond when they're angry. And, sometimes you might be able to know who it was that responded based on something that perhaps happened with a grade or something in the class. I mean, I think that's just probably like course evaluations too. Sometimes people might know when somebody writes something, because of something they knew that happened. But I think setting it up in a positive way so that students know we're not doing this to have a gotcha. You're not required to do this either. We're not giving you extra work. This is for you to help us help you. And I think the second question is feedback from faculty obtained prior to making changes to a course. And
Sherry, for this one, I
ahead.
would say for this particular pilot, I don't think we made any changes. Sherry mentioned that we look for patterns. So if it's like a one-off comment from a student, we always brought that up, but it seemed like it was, a student just had the way they phrased their feedback or something like that just seemed like we look for patterns. So it's got to be more students over multiple terms before we jump in and make a change. But if we did make a change, or when we do make changes for other instances, we certainly seek feedback from the faculty that teaches the course most. For the course in question, 6105, we have a longtime faculty member in that course, and she was on some of these meetings about this tool, and she was very aware of it and ready to implement. And we shared real-time feedback with her on a weekly basis, just about. So she was very in tune to what was going on and the potential to make changes.
Any other questions about that? Or anything else about challenges or drawbacks? If not, I will hand it over to Mark with the next slide.
Thanks, Sherry. As we reflect on the pilot and the idea of real-time feedback, we wanted to share with you maybe ways this could apply in your situation, and kind of come up with two different ways. One, you could formally get involved in the pilot program, essentially talk to your supervisor, and if it feels like it's a fit for your program, your leadership could reach out to PDCD and discuss any specific needs you might have, so you can use the functionality within Canvas the way we're using it. But if you're not quite ready to do that, or if you just don't wish to, there's lots of techniques where you can kind of circumvent the pilot and do a couple things on your own. So I put up a list of some best practices, and then I'll talk about some kind of tools where you can kind of do the same thing. So and these tools will be free. So the first best practice, first and foremost, it's making sure your feedback is aligned to learning outcomes. So in most of our courses, students see the outcomes in their syllabus at the start of a course or a week, and they're expected to learn, those particular skills or knowledge. So we want to make sure that the feedback language that our faculty are using incorporates the same language that's listed in those outcomes. So students will they'll see it and they'll recognize it. Number two, we all know this one. It's the balance positive and negative feedback. So in IDT specifically, we require instructors to leave a specific rubric comment anytime they mark a student off on a given criterion. And this obviously lets the student know how to improve on a project. A lot of our projects are culminating, so they'll submit like a final version later on in the course. They say like week 10 in a quarter-based course. So that's room for improvement. And if that comment's not there, then there's no opportunity for them to know what they did wrong and improve. But on the other side of that, we also want to leave positive comments. When students are doing something right, it reinforces that that behavior. Number three is something that we have in just about all of our courses, but in an informal way, and that's to encourage peer feedback. Feedback from peers might be a little less intimidating than that from the instructor. It could provide a fresh perspective, could build a sense of community and collaboration. But we want to make a point to only use this as supplemental to the instructor feedback and to use it as discretion, because obviously students aren't experts in the topic, so some of the feedback might be erroneous, so you want to use it at your discretion. That's the note we give the students. We never require them to implement what students are suggesting, just make considerations. It's a very collaborative process. And you can benefit from any of the techniques that I talked about on this slide, using technology tools to offer students instant feedback. And I divided this up into three categories: video conferencing, collaboration boards, and surveys. So I'll talk about some specific uses of those on the next slide. For video conferencing, our faculty have access to the big blue button in Canvas. I think we all know that. We have access to Microsoft Teams. So those are two university sanctioned tools. Google Meet is free, and it's also aligned to other Google tools like your calendar. So if you're a Google fan, I highly recommend Google Meet. Personal preference is Zoom, but obviously Zoom's not free. I know a lot of people use that and pay for a subscription, which I think is worth it. In IDT, we use at least 3 out of 4 of these when we meet with students one-to-one. And we offer support one-to-one for students on things like software installation. We provide all our students with access to Adobe Creative Cloud, and sometimes they have trouble installing the software, so we'll get on one-to-one and help them with that. If they're struggling with any kind of content, or if they want to get on for an instant feedback session on a course project. So our course projects are culminating. So they get feedback, they're supposed to apply that feedback in a subsequent week. And these one-to-one feedback sessions with our instructors are good for students that tend to struggle. We recommend using real-time collaboration boards like Padlet and Jamboard. And these are essentially like virtual whiteboards that you can update in real time. Jamboard is a Google tool. So again, if you prefer Google, that'll kind of align with your other Google tools. If you're not interested in the pilot, but you want to seek real-time feedback on content resources or another component of a week, maybe you have a trouble area and you want to seek feedback, you can bypass the pilot. Highly recommend getting involved if you want to. But you can use tools like SurveyMonkey or Google Forms and create your survey, post it as a course announcement, use the same kind of styling. We use a lot of Likert scale in ours to make sure that the feedback was scaled and relevant. And you could post these to your announcements. You could build it directly into the course. If you're going to do that, we do recommend making sure you get approval from your leadership. And then there's two at the very end of this list, and those are for collaborating on session time. So if you're going to have students get an appointment for this one-to-one real feedback sessions, tools like Doodle and Calendly, they could help you collaborate on common meeting times. So instead of sending an email out to students going back and forth saying, when are you available? These types of tools will save you time and get that meeting on the calendar very quickly. And I did see a note in the chat. I'm aware that Jamboard is going away. I was on there earlier today, and yeah, there's a note up on the website already. So this is just a list of some of the tools. There's a lot more that we could talk about if anybody wants to bring up some other tools that they recommend. We're going to advance it to the next slide for discussion and questions. So if you have any other tools outside of the tools we talked about in the pilot, please do share. Or if you have any other questions on the presentation in general, please don't hesitate to ask.
I see your chat is been going strong, and if you want to unmute, everyone's mic is enabled as well.
I have a question maybe to help people get started. Is there anything you do in your specific program to seek feedback, whether it's real time or not? What kind of information do you gather? And at what level do you need it to be before you make a change in the course? And what does that look like for you?
All right, it's very quiet, so I'll answer. Hi, I'm Allison. I'm in core faculty for the undergraduate college. And I would say that a lot of the feedback that I get is just through student questions. And so we use that a lot to make changes in the courses. If we're getting the same question, term after term after term, we'll adjust the course to kind of either clarify instructions or provide more information or do whatever's needed to help address that kind of question.
Allison, was there like a recent change that you made that you can remember?
Sure. We just made an adjustment in a history class that I actually don't teach history, but I helped with the revision just because I'm detail oriented, I guess. I don't know. But yeah, there were confusing instructions for assignments that I think that the instructors were getting confused comments from students, and they were also probably not just getting questions, but getting like the assignments getting turned in were missing pieces or had addressed the item not quite in the way that they wanted. And so they provided some like clarifying wording.
Great. When Brandy first approached us on this one, my first question was like, don't we already do that with the surveys at the end of the course? And then Brandy was like, no, this would be right away. You would find out as soon as the student was at that page in Canvas. So that was the distinction for us, was not waiting. And it was helpful for us because brand new program, brand new course, first time it launched, we didn't want to wait a full 11 weeks to make a change.
That's really cool. Yeah, that makes sense.
Brandy, is there any other reason why anybody on the call might want to get involved in the pilot?
Well, I mean, I think it provides a great opportunity, even for a broader look at the courses and the designs. We're looking specifically at the MS-IDT program, but perhaps if people from other programs would like to do a similar pilot, that might give us information that's you know, not necessarily program specific, but that would still help across the board, to be able to help all of our students and support them better.
So we did this at the beginning because our program was new. What do you think, Brandy, if someone does it, they know that they're going to be designing or revising their program, but they put questions in the current program assignments to kind of get feedback from students to help them think about, okay, now we really will be able to change this. Do you think there would be an advantage to something like that?
Yeah, I think that would be a great use case for this, because that could then inform your revisions that you're doing to the course, if you could be gathering information ahead of time.
Yeah, sure. We had one example of an assignment that we've done for years and years. So it wasn't necessarily new for us, but it was the portfolio that we have throughout the entire program. But in the legacy program, it was only introduced in the capstone, and we would provide students with 3 or 4 free options for a portfolio tool. And the resources for those portfolio tools were never 100% reliable. Like the websites would go down, the tool would become obsolete. So kind of fought hard for that one prompt that we used in the new program, which we introduced in the first course, to let students know, are you happy with the resources that are provided? Because they're not made by Walden, they were made by external sources. So for me, that was a piece that's been on my mind for over a decade, to get feedback from students on that without waiting for the end of course survey or the APR.
It's a great example.
And I think too, with these, with what we're talking about, like with the real-time feedback questions, as an individual or as a team, you have more control over the questions that are asked and can really drill down deeper into things than what might be possible, like with the CELT survey, because I know that that's looking at a variety of things, and not just the classroom design, or not just feedback that would enable an instructor. In fact, I don't think any necessarily feedback that would enable an instructor to do something immediately, like an intervention to help a student succeed. And that was one of the things we looked at in the beginning, when we evaluated like the different surveys and instruments or different things that we use right now to collect information. None of them really got at this kind of information.
Yeah, I think that's neat. It's almost like when you're teaching in a, on-ground classroom, and you can see your students and you can see are they nodding along with me? Are they looking totally lost? You can get that kind of like in the moment feedback.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if there are no other questions, I think that's it for us. We appreciate everybody's time. And the next slide is what I talked about with all the references. We were doing research to see if this was worth our time, which we decided it was. So if you're interested in reviewing those articles, they're on the screen there. But it's been a pleasure. Appreciate your time, everybody.
Yes, thank you so much to our presenters, and I appreciate you putting forth this information. I am recording today's session, and I will be sending out a link to everyone who attended for this session, along with a link to the PowerPoints. We also will link them on our OTLE website, and if you need that link, it's in the chat. Thank you to our attendees as well for carving out time to soak in this information. We really appreciate your dedication to Walden and our students, and we look forward to seeing you again at another upcoming session. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.